everybody. Welcome to the C3 Answer the Call to Conscious Leadership event for February. Today, we're talking about a topic that has been in our poll for a little while now, and I'm excited to finally talk about it. And especially because there always seems to be some kind of, I don't know if it's just how the algorithms work, but leading up to these events, sometimes it's like the news feed suddenly has all of these interesting parcels about the topic that we choose. If you're new to the C3 community or Answer the Call to Conscious Leadership events, the C3 community is the Corporate Consciousness Co-op. It's a LinkedIn community that I co-manage along with Lawrence Henderson, who couldn't join me today. It's a group of corporate professionals and conscious leaders who are committed to transforming the corporate consciousness landscape, just leveling up leadership so that we can move in a direction that places people and people and the planet alongside profit, the triple bottom line, so to speak, and how we do that and all the sticky situations that we can come across, models, tools, topics that are relevant to that. Today, taking your whole self to bring your whole self to work. It's a topic that's close to my heart because for the past 15 years, I've been guiding professionals in how they can align their talent with their values so that they can bring more of themselves to work. And I'm excited to talk about this topic because it's even just like, is that a good thing or not? And I'm going to open the floor to Christopher Waters here, my longtime friend. He's been a panelist and a con speaker. And he's a social impact expert, an adjunct professor at Wilmington University. And coincidentally, he also helped Adam Grant launch his book, Give and Take. And Adam Grant has some things to say about taking your whole self to work as well. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you. Yeah, the members of the bull-headed brotherhood mean so we have to help each other out. It's the law.
Yeah.
I think that is interesting that we talk about. I started reading a lot of books recently, and a lot of self-help books and a lot of career books. And one of the books I read is that you don't ask about, and it said you don't ask about bringing your whole self to work unless you miss the mark. Of bring your whole self to work. And it said, and it basically came down, it was like, and he basically said a boomerang is not supposed to return. So when you throw a boomerang, it's like it's supposed to no, it's not supposed to return. It's supposed to hit the mark, but if it hits the mark, it's supposed to come back. And I think a lot of times, especially now, we talk about the Great Resignation. We talk about everyone, like people not entering back the workforce. And I always come back to the question of, did we miss our mark? Did we leave something out? Are we reevaluating our lives? Are we evaluating our work lives and our balance? And all these things are coming about all at once. And I think it comes back to the idea that there's a lot of things about our life that we have left on the, and our whole selves that we either left on the wayside because there wasn't enough time, or it wasn't deemed important, or it wasn't deemed profitable. And I think this is the first time in a long time where as a society and as a world, we sat back for 2 years and said, you know what, maybe we ought to do something a little bit different. And what does that different look like? And let's have these conversations and let them be awkward. And let's talk about diversity. And let's talk about all these things all at once. And I think that's what bring your whole self to work is about recognizing that conversation, but also realizing that it's going to take a lot of practice, and it's going to take a lot of mistakes and a lot of efforts and a lot of doing things wrong, a lot of doing things and getting things right, finally getting things right. But I think that's what the conversation is going. I don't know what you feel about that, but I see that conversation happening all the time.
Well, this actually was born out of the mess that all the difficult conversations that we've been avoiding, and all that became evident in a time of pandemic, as and all the things that coincided with the pandemic as well. The more elevated awareness of the need for further social justice and racial justice, and it's in terms of. So I'm on the fence. I think that, like most things, I feel like individuals need greater self-awareness and coaching and guidance in order to even realize how they're inhibiting their progress, their success. And when it comes to careering, you choose your criteria for your next employer based on what conditions you need to thrive, which actually conflicts with one of my favorite authors and teachers, Cy Wakeman, who says people have too many conditions around what they need in order to gain buy-in and perform. And I think that there's a way you can meet in the middle where you acknowledge that compartmentalization is a necessary survival tactic, right? I mean, especially emergency responders and anybody in a high stress situation needs to be able to put aside, anything that might be going on outside of the work environment in order to make decisions and act. And so it's necessary, but like everything, it needs a balance. You need to be like, okay, well, wait, I'm tipping into the point where I can't stop the bleed from this area of my life into other areas of my life. And psychological safety and conscious leadership is about acknowledging the whole person. I mean, maybe that whole person doesn't come in with all of their problems and dump them on the boss per se, but an acknowledgement where it's psychologically safe to say to the person who is responsible for your performance and say, these things are impacting my work, and to guide them in even greater self-awareness around that, just to be able to inquire, to say, hey, I noticed, I'm noticing some things, and to get curious about that and to ask some questions. And maybe you do, like Cy Wakeman says, expect that in that moment, regardless of what's going on, you still choose to be great. You still choose to put your ego aside. You still choose, to do what it takes to be successful in that moment. But then also have an acknowledgement that there's other help that's needed there, that we can't just ignore this part of their lives that's going sideways. So acknowledging that not all of the things that that impact our outside of work life should come to work with us, but the strengths and the talents that you have should come to work with you, and you should be able to apply them. So there's like the whole self that's like, these are all my talents and skills, and I want to just be able to apply them, whether I'm paid for that or not. So choosing a career that enables you to access and apply all of that. But then also, we have to talk about mental health, and we have to talk about the fact that compartmentalization can, if you over apply it, it has its limits in helping you survive situations with your mental health intact.
Yeah, I always find it interesting that the, most of the business articles I read, and a lot of the talks I've gone to recently have been all about the idea of getting back to normal and getting back to the way it was before, and these are like in every article and almost of the speakers I've heard is like, these are the tricks that we're doing to get more productivity out of people. And these are the tricks that we're doing to get more, them back to, where they're supposed to be. And I find it funny that I think in some levels, the most leadership is their default setting is that. Their default setting is like productivity over anything else. Like that's my job as leader is not to think about you as an individual, or think about what your family's going through, or think about what the girl goes through. My job is to produce, and your job is to be a equation in that a cog or equation in that production. And anything I can do besides talking to you, or besides treating like a human being, or realize that there's a sense of loss that you have, or a sense of a lack of continuity that you have, I have to honor that. It's like, oh no, I have to make you think I honor that. But in the day, it's in the day, it's like, it's about you producing. That's what
Right.
it's all about. And
Yeah.
anything I do is about you producing. And I think there's a reflection point with some people, and I think there's not a reflection point with the system itself, of that point of saying, how long can we do this? How long can this be maintained?
Yeah.
And if the answer is not forever, as we learned over the last 2 years, it was never going to be forever. But if we just make people buy in, believe it's going to be forever, if we can get them to buy back in, that is what we're trying to aim for. and that's
Right.
what I want. And I think there is a sense of people saying no. Like it's like no, it's like I'm not buying back in. It's like what do you mean you're not buying back in? What's like, and the answer like what's wrong with you? Why aren't you buying back in? And it's
Right.
like well, I never kind of really bought it to begin with. It's like this is what we're talking about. You're not buying into what you need to believe in. You're not believing in the system anymore, and that is why you're. That's why we're failing. And it's like I
The
don't think that's.
norm
I don't think
wasn't
that's
working
why
for
we're failing.
everyone. Clearly it wasn't working for everyone, you know?
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, there's a sense of I remember my one friend telling me, and I thought it was rather interesting. He said people confuse passion with purpose.
Mm.
And he said, like, like find your passion, find your passion, find your passion. And he said, and he's a school teacher. He said, I love history. And so the first thing they tell you is that is if you're going to be you love history and you're a teacher, is not to teach history because it's like why it's like because like they'll never love it as much as you will, and you will
Mm.
always be disappointed that they don't.
Mhm.
So he said my purpose is teaching. He said my
Mhm.
purpose, that's my purpose. My purpose is teaching. I love teaching. I love putting information out there. He said my passion is teaching history.
Mm.
But he said the idea of teaching history and my students not getting it as much as I do, or my
Yeah.
team, like it's like oh, that's where the disconnect happens, and that's where the divide begins. And I was like, I never thought about that, right? But I said I get it. I get the idea. Like my purpose is teaching, but I love teaching history. But it's like, oh yeah, if you don't love it as much as I do, there's something wrong with you. There's not like you just don't. I'm disappointed in you. I don't get why you're not buying in as much as I am.
Right. Yes. Well, I remember from my teaching days that, I get pretty excited about certain topics as well. And yeah, actually, I learned that a lot of my students are now in professional branding.
Oh,
One
really?
one even started his own firm. So
Nice.
maybe my passion did kind of bleed in a little
Yeah.
bit. It's interesting because I did a podcast years ago called Epic Career Tales, and one of my guests was an Emmy award winning journalist and producer. And she, when I asked her how it feels to have a purpose, she said it's a burden. And that was a surprising answer. I really didn't think that she would say that, but it can be absolutely true, because when you have a purpose, you have an end goal, like potentially, like there's something you want to see, some outcome you want, and the need to take efforts to produce that outcome can sometimes supersede the other things in your life. Like it becomes something that is like a burden. It's heavy, it pulls you, it's like I'm supposed to be doing this right now, but this is something that I really need to happen. I need it to happen. I need it to happen. And that's something that I have learned through 2020 to kind of let go of, and actually something that C3 really helped me with, because it's not my burden alone. I'm sharing the burden of a more conscious leadership landscape with a community of people who all feel the same, and they're all doing things to help produce a similar outcome. And it feels so much lighter to know that I'm not the only person who needs to make this happen.
Mhm.
And is it my passion? Like people, my clients, like helping them, and those moments where they have those moments where it's like everything is aligned and they feel like they're bringing their whole selves to work again. Um, that's a passion. But I have other passions, and do you bring them to work with you? Like music is a passion. um, I actually did try to blend music with my coaching practice, and I might still in the future. It was like a little experiment. But am I gonna? What does that look like? Bringing music to work in my coaching practice every day? um, I don't know. Maybe it would take off, but for me, I could have probably made it a profession, but I didn't want to have to do it.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be um so I so my career. My career is very vast and very expansive. I worked in all three sectors. I worked in private sector, I worked in government sector, I worked in nonprofit sector, I work
Mm-hmm.
in education sector.
Mm-hmm.
And I think um I had in 2011, I applied for a job doing economic development. And I had no background in economic development, like none, like no background in economic development. And I got hired. I got hired within, I applied and got interviewed, and I applied for an assistant program manager job, and I got the program manager job. I had a new contract, and they had a program manager job open. Um, and what's interesting was that I asked my boss Don Kelly at the time why he hired me, and he said, you can learn the skills of
Mm-hmm.
economic development. You can
Mm-hmm.
learn the tools. You can learn the intricacies. You can learn how it works, but you can't learn how to. It takes a long time for people to be taught or learn or how to get along with people. It takes a
Yeah.
long time to have someone speak and have people understand them. It
Yeah.
takes a long time to know how to resolve conflict, and build collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a long and he said, like, those are all skills that, all those are all talents that you showed. I showed from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
but the other side of it is that it's like, yeah, you don't know economic development. It's like, yeah, but you know the elements of economic development. The
Mm-hmm.
element of economic development is being able to collaborate. The skills of economic development are to able to plan and build out things and think long term and short term and think of. And he said, I think, and I said, I think. In some people's eyes, that when they think about their whole self of work, they leave a lot of that out. They think that they're what they're bringing to the table is just their skill set. Is that, like,
Mm-hmm.
I know Salesforce, I know Excel, I know all the things on paper that that their job description tells them they need to know, are all the things they specifically interview or bring out in the interview and bring out when they're at the job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the one thing that, even when I was a director, even when I'm hiring, the one thing I try to think about is that, all right, think beyond what's in front of you. You can find anybody to get with half the skill sets in front of you, but
Mm-hmm.
are they going to get along with their coworkers? Are they going to resolve issues outside with the vendor? Or are they going to work in that environment? And I think sometimes when we talk about the idea of bringing your whole self to work, we only look at talent. And we don't look at the intangibles of, like, are you going to be a future leader, and
Mm-hmm.
can I see that from your past, and can I see that from just talking to you, that that you are going to be a future manager, or you are going to be a future, I see something in there that, you can be a leader in this organization, and I think you need to be here to develop that, and I want to be a part of that development. I think sometimes we forget about that a lot when we talk about hiring and bringing your whole self to work and developing an
Mm-hmm.
idea and developing staff. We leave that part out.
Interesting. So it sounds like there's skills and then there's talent, but then there's also aptitude, right? That you can
Yes.
see the potential for somebody that they're going to grow in a different direction. If you leave one of those pieces out of the puzzle, then you're essentially not helping somebody bring their whole selves to work.
Hmm.
Yep. Interesting. So if you're watching, feel free to jump in with your comments and your questions. We'd love to engage with you. Love to find out, what are your thoughts on bringing your whole self to work? Are you for or against? And why, right? And like I said, I think I'm in the middle. Where are you at? Are you in the middle, or are you on one side or the other?
I am I am for it. And I'm for it because I think there's so many things that you discover.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, I remember I work in the social impact space. So half my job is innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And half my job is actually bringing ideas and people to the table that often don't get to the table. So if I bring people of diversity, and I bring people of different backgrounds to the table, and I give them a project, and I tell them to stay within parameters of the project,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I'm gonna get exactly what would happen is if I didn't bring diversity to the table. I'm gonna get
Yeah.
exactly what happened
Right.
if I didn't bring anybody different to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if I bring those people to the table, the first thing I have to do is that, you create a you create a culture of dialogue, and you create a culture of working together. You create a culture of everyone has a piece of buying in.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, it goes where it goes, and it goes with, the parameters in front of them is the parameters in which they try to stick by. But eventually you come out with an idea that is usually more inventive, more innovative, makes more impact, has a lot of things that you would never, one group would have never thought about without somebody else from outside that group saying something.
Yeah.
And the impact, and also the way to build forward. So the idea where this is the beginning, but we're moving forward from here, and the effects of actually talking to someone from outside your realm on a subject is I told somebody, it's like, it's nothing funnier than having it's nothing funnier than me as a social impact person talking to someone from business, and
Mm-hmm.
someone actually from business saying, like, government's all screwed up. And me going back, like, I work in all three sectors. All of them, like, your hands aren't clean either. Like, you're no better than I am. So
Yeah.
here's why. I think
Hmm.
I think that conversation, and that I feel like I said, I've been very blessed in my career that I've worked in all three sectors, and I've been able to develop a career that has been encompassing. But I think when I sit down for a project, or sit down for an idea, or a board meeting, or teaching organizational development, whatever, I
Mm-hmm.
bring all that with me, and my perspective in working all three is the power that I bring sometimes.
Power. Yes. So far we've talked about the part of your whole self that is the talent and the skills and the passion and being able to innovate by applying parts of your life that might not be literally related to the project, and adding those pieces and then finding your power. What about bringing your whole self to work when it's not your best self?
I think that's the part of it, that's part of it, isn't
Mm-hmm.
it? I mean, you just can't take all the good, and you have to take the. It's like, like, I just I want nothing but good to happen to me for the rest of my life. And
Yeah.
but yeah, but all the important lessons of the bad, you
Mm-hmm.
would you would miss. Like, I remember my one boss telling me, like, come to me and saying, like, Chris, I want to have a staff meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. And I looked at him. I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Well, I'm awake at 8 o'clock in the morning on a." He's like, "I'm awake. I'm up. I'm ready to go. 8 o'clock. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I do a jog. I'm ready to go 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday." And I said, "That's not going to work for the people like." It's like, that's the badness coming. That's the badness of me coming out. It's like,
Yeah.
people ain't ready for that. Like, 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. Why would you do that to your staff? And it's like, well, I'm ready to go. I can't understand why you're not ready to go. And it's like, how about Tuesday at 1? And it's like, why Tuesday at 1? I'm like, you got the whole Monday out of the way. As I
Mm-hmm.
said, it's right before lunch or after lunch. People are ready. And I said, people are still willing to sit down and listen to whatever I get, and you'll get more interaction. But I think that is also part of it too. Like, people have bad days. People have, as I was saying earlier about the idea of having production without the other side of it. Like, it's like, you have to acknowledge that people have bad days,
Yeah.
that reports are late, that meetings fail, that proposal or like go, and
Yeah.
treating someone, we're talking about your whole self. We're talking about, I think, you want to explain, spin out, talk about being human, like, talk about the idea of being human, and realizing that, people's, like, people having. My friend told me, joked around me, and he said that, he has a new baby. Oh, not new baby. He's 4 years old now. And he's like, yeah. He's like, the last good night's sleep I got was the night before my son was born. And I was like, well, that's real. And he said, and it's like, so,
Mhm.
like, says, like, so for the first 6 months, that was rough. I would go, like,
Mhm.
I would fall asleep in meetings. I would do this, I would do that. But that's the idea of, like, we compensate for that. Like, we have to be human enough to understand that you have a new baby, and you are going to show up sometimes with
Hallelujah.
something on your tie that I don't know what color it is, but I don't think that's yours.
Right.
And I think that's part of it too. And being in, I think, and doing that has your team, or has your company, or as a leader, as a boss, you accept that as being a full person now. and
Mm-hmm.
you accept that and you adapt. But also that adapting and that bond between you two, or bond between you and your staff or employee becomes stronger because you realize that I'm compensating for you, but you acknowledge that I'm compensating for you. You realizing that I'm like, you know what? He's going like, I'm like, like take a day off. Like, why? He's like, when last time you got a good night's sleep? Like, like 6 months ago. All right, you look a little rough. Take a day off. Go someplace. You and your wife come back on Monday. Be ready. But I
Yeah.
think that's part of it too.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. And I want to get back to the caretaking aspect and how, nobody can um, completely just leave caretaking at home. It winds up turning into an interruption in your workday, no matter what. Matt was here saying, I enjoy getting coworkers to bring them whole selves to work through coaching. I find it rewarding. And certainly it is. And I'd love to ask Matt some more questions about that. And we can talk about it certainly off the event. But if he's still here, tell me more about what that looks like. I mean, I know that you work in an industry, Matt, where, um, you know, the most restaurants are struggling to maintain their employees right now. And, and they're, when they go to work, they're facing extreme, um, volatility, I want to say, because you have the supply chain issues and things aren't on the menu and people are just generally more upset. And I mean, I'd imagine that you'd really need to be a strong coach to lead through that in the restaurant industry in particular. And I'd love to know more about what that looks like and what your tricks are. And obviously it's not even just a bad day at home, but having a bad day at work, how you can help them rebound through that. And, back to the caretaker thing. Matt, if you're here, just comment a little bit more about that. So many women, 2 million women left the workforce through the pandemic. And then when things started rolling back in, and the expectation is, okay, well, we did or did not give you grace through that, but either way, the grace is over, right?
Yeah.
I mean, meanwhile, the pandemic's still going on. There's still mass absenteeism, and even at work, there's now like mass presenteeism, which is coming to work and still kind of being checked out, which has costs that companies really can't measure in a lot of ways. I mean, that's related to engagement, but it's kind of different too. And that we can talk about that when you fail to coach your employees and bringing their whole selves to work. And that's what I think is the key, is the coaching. The coaching is, helping people acknowledge that maybe they're not their best selves in this moment, right? Let's see where are you at? Let me meet you where you're at. Let me see what you're able to do in this moment. And let's put into place some plans, some tools, some systems that will help you get the help you need in the other areas of your life and your relationships at work, whatever it is that's impeding your ability to be your best self right now. Let's tackle it. Let me give you some tools. Let me help you. And not all bosses necessarily are going to be coaches. Should they be? Well, I don't know. I'm kind of the ilk that you should be an empathetic boss and understand that these parameters exist. You don't have to solve all their problems, I think, is the key. You just have to make sure that they get help and then learn how to manage that they learn over time that getting help is great. They can do it. It helps them. And then, they ask for help when they need it.
Yeah, I think that um, it's interesting because I think I think of all like, so a couple years, about 5-6 years ago, my mom had cancer, and one of the best support system I had was actually my staff. So I was director, and I had it was relatively maybe about about 6 months, 6 like not even 6 months, like 3 or 4 months into me having a job. My mom got diagnosed with cancer, and then she had to go to chemotherapy, and there were a lot of doctor's appointments, and she has diabetes, so it became very complicated. And it was reflecting on it, the support network in my office of just my staff itself is what allowed me to get through that. And the idea where, I said, I say that compensation and that allowance is that idea that that someone else is human and they're going through something.
Mm-hmm.
It for me, I think that is something that as I said, it goes both ways. But I
Mm-hmm.
think also that if I hadn't set up an environment of support around them first,
Mm-hmm.
and then and then without realizing that not only was that support going out, it was actually coming back in, I don't think that environment would have been there.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times what happens is that, especially when we're thinking about, especially when we get our leadership and we get that that idea of manager or director or whatever by your name. I think sometimes we forget that the environment in which you are creating through support and through coaching and through being invested in your employees and having your employees be invested in each other is what allows you to be a director, is what
Yeah.
allows you to be manager, is that
Mm-hmm.
you're not managing people anymore, you're managing situations.
Yeah.
And it's like this situation is going, like, tell me what's going on. And I think so many times we are told to manage the people. Like, you got to manage them, you got to produce, and not thinking about how do I get them to take ownership and produce on their own. How do I
Mm-hmm.
get them to be invested in their position? What do I need for them to develop that I don't need? I can check in with them once a week instead of being checking into them like every 5 minutes or
Yeah.
micromanaging them.
Right.
And I think sometimes it's hard. It's hard to do that, and it's very difficult because you have to again go back to bring your whole self at work. You have to bring that part of yourself to
Vulnerability.
get to the situation
Yeah.
and have it not only accept someone else's vulnerability, but also show vulnerability
Mm.
back,
Oh yeah.
and let somebody in. And I think that is, I mean, most we barely do that in personal relationships, let alone business relationships.
True. I
that
know.
that wall goes up and that wall stays up, and it's like, what's going on at home? Everything is all right. And it's like, are you sure everything's all right? It's like, yeah, I'm good. It's like, then all right, cool. Then tell me, like, then why is this like? And I
Yeah.
think that is the sign of vulnerability is sometimes that is something that we don't honor and something that we don't respect in
Yes.
at work. And it's kind of like, you can't allowing someone who has a single mother who has a child to go, like, I have to leave work every day at 3:30 to go pick my son to take him
Mm-hmm.
home because
Mm-hmm.
the buses aren't going for whatever reason. It's kind of like, no, you got to be here. Like, you got to be at this meeting. It's like you got to make a decision. You're either in this meeting or you go home with your kid. And it's kind of like, it's like there, and I guess in my head, it's like there's no decision. Like go home with your
Right.
kid. It's
Yeah.
like go home with
Of
go home with
course.
your kid. Like, wow, this meeting will be fine without you. Like, we'll adapt and everything will be fine. But
Mm-hmm.
unless you're doing, I said, give me your notes if you're doing a presentation, or we'll skip past your part. But that idea that, like, no, this is number one, everything outside is number two,
Mm-hmm.
and not realizing that it's like, no, this is number one here, that's number one there,
Yeah.
and the two are sometimes in conflict, but the outside part sometimes has to win because it has to win, and that's okay, and that is your responsibility as much as being here is your responsibility.
Absolutely. You hit on a bunch of different things. So you hit on giving grace and having that be setting a foundation that enables you to receive grace at the same time. And then modeling vulnerability so that, because that is definitely something that was the norm that needs to change, that we can't show up to work and have and not and be human, that expectation that we'll just leave the world outside at the doors and come in and put our head down, and if something's wrong, I mean, I've had clients who work in environments where they can't laugh in meetings. Like on a report, somebody made an error that said asses instead of assess, and nobody laughed. No, like they were texting each other to like laugh about it, but they couldn't show even humor. And then same with another. I'm thinking of different clients. I'm thinking of clients who even entered into leadership because it seemed like the next logical step, and then they got there and they're realizing that I've had them say, this feels like babysitting. Like they just expected to be able to tell people what to do, maybe guide them around the actual function of the job and have them perform.
Yeah.
And that's a recipe for disappointment, expecting that people will just come to work and perform, and you won't have any things that you have to check in on. And thanks, Matt, you're still here. Getting to know your team, treating them fair. And of course, you can't help your team bring their whole selves to work if you don't know them, right? I mean, you can only know so much in the hiring process. And even if you are incorporating the talent and the skills and the aptitude, once they're there, taking the time. And I think that time investment is something that people who enter into leadership might not have anticipated, especially if they're a hybrid leader where they have to perform the job themselves. Like a sales, managers sometimes have to still go out and close sales while still performing and providing leadership. And then you have a professional whose income is being inhibited now by the lack of performance of a team. And they have to choose, like, I can go close this sale and make money for the company, which I've been really great at my whole career thus far, or I can take the time to help my team member, through this performance challenge that they're experiencing, whatever it is. I think that model's definitely a bad model, the hybrid leader / performer.
But what's interesting is what you're talking about is that you're talking about competition, and I think and we're talking about there's positive my friend, someone told me, there's positive competition and negative competition. It's like if you're positive, if the competition is a positive competition, is that if the idea is that you're making someone else better with that competition and you're doing it in a positive way, that's what you want. But it's like there's always that it's like yeah, but that's the part that takes the most time and at least doesn't show, it takes sometimes months or years to get fruition off of that. However, if I tell you it's like that it's like Glengarry Ross, always be closing. Like this is what you're supposed to do. You're not doing it. You're fired. You have make an adult decision, and you're gonna make an adult wrong one. You're fired anyway. But if you make the right one, you fail. You're fired anyway. It's like,
what an innovation killer that is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the fear of failure is real, and that's also something that we can't go back to that norm. And back to Matt's point, when you have good performance, it takes time to recognize that performance. It doesn't take long to recognize performance. And, you have to learn even how people are incentivized by that reinforcement. What really helps them get that reinforcement? Yeah.
It's interesting. And I'm thinking about when you said, the negative side of it, the idea that, the idea of making mistakes and learning from your mistakes. And I think when people get to a certain level, they think of all well, I didn't do that I didn't do that. I didn't have those mistakes. And it's like, no, you're forgetting you made those mistakes. You're overlooking that you made those mistakes. You think that in some ways, I got this level without, we're working hard and taking advantage of my opportunities and not making any mistakes. And it's like, no, you made mistakes. You earned.
Everybody's human. Everybody makes
and
mistakes.
You fell on your face a couple times, and you'll fall on your face a couple times, and people sometimes look the other way, and that's okay too. And sometimes when people fall on their face, you have to it's like you acknowledge it. Sometimes you know what, we're gonna let that one go.
And if you didn't make mistakes, then you only did things that you knew you would succeed at, and you didn't actually grow, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking of another person that I spoke with further back when I did a talk on kind of similar, bring your whole self to work. It was more of a career related discussion. And we talked about, just being real with what you're going through and being vulnerable. And he disagreed with that. He had his wife have cancer, and unfortunately she didn't make it. And through that, he somehow, achieved these unprecedented sales goals, and because he did that, he had a lack of empathy for what anybody else might be going through, because he was able to still perform at his peak. And he was pretty much like, I had no choice. I had to perform. Wow. And I just felt like pity. I felt pity that he couldn't, that instead of spending his wife's, last days, months, whatever, spending time with him, that he had this pressure on him. I mean, kudos to him for doing that. But unfortunately, what now he's seeing is what his belief is that I did it and everybody else can just suck it up and do it too. And, it occurs to me, like, maybe he was avoiding the pain, like
There,
maybe he
there,
was just digging in to work because it was easier.
yeah, my, I was having a discussion once, and we were talking about, what people should do. And I said, it's like I said, like, you should be doing this, and this is what you should be doing. I
Mm.
did it. You should be doing it too.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, like, it's like, no, it's like that's, I said, that's the wrong way to think about it. I said, you're not taking the circumstance of the purpose you're talking to
Mm-hmm.
into effect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, you should, like, you should be doing this, and you should be doing that, and this is what you should be. And I said, it's like I said, there's sometimes that conversation needs to be had. Like, every
Yeah.
once in a while you need to have that conversation. Like, just get your act together, please,
Yeah.
please, for the love of God, get your act
Sure.
together.
Yeah.
And I said, when it becomes that is your only way of communicating
Mm-hmm.
your wants to somebody, or your needs to somebody, or your demands of that person, it leads down a very negative path, because what happens if that person is not capable of doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And it is not
Mm.
doesn't have either the resources or the mentality or the wherewithal to do that, and not see that person in front of you as a person, as a person, and saying,
Yeah.
like, this is what I did. I remember there's these commercials where people talk about asking for help, like, no psychiatry help. And
Mm-hmm.
there's one commercial where the guy has 300 pounds on his chest, and some guy comes
Oh,
like,
I've
you need
seen
help with
that.
that? And he's like, no, I got it. And he's
Yeah.
like, no, you need help. And it's like, no, I got this. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, you don't. And it's like, let me, like, and we talk we don't talk about, and these commercials are very real, because we talk about the idea where in so many ways we'll hire, I told somebody, like, we don't hire professionals. Like, me and my mom has argument all the time about something gets broken in her house, and she's like, well, you can fix it. And I'm like, I'm not good at fixing things. I'm good at hiring people to fix things. I'm not good at fixing things. I will break it worse. It's like, it's only going to take you 15 minutes to fix. I'm like, it's going to take me an hour to fix, and then it's going to take me another $2,000 to call somebody in to
Yeah.
fix what I broke. So
Right.
let's just pay $200 for someone to come in to fix. I think there's so many times that, they're in our head, we have an image of what needs to be done, and we're trying to force somebody to do it, instead of actually trying to explain how they can do it themselves, or find it within themselves to do it. Which goes back to coaching, which goes back to empathy, but to
Right.
have someone find it within themselves to make that first step, that takes a little bit more dedication. I think sometimes that people are willing
That's
to
the
put in.
modeling vulnerability, creating
Yeah.
psychological safety. That's like, the whole, like, I got this mentality. Um, I mean, let's take a look at the rise of mental illness, like, something's at the core of that. And certainly we can take a look at the pandemic and all that's been volatile about the world lately. But we have to say that if we don't take care of this person as a whole person, eventually they'll become a person who isn't capable of much at all. They're that's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And Doc here, who's also been a C3 panelist for us in the past, says whole self at work probably has different levels. Yeah, definitely talent, skills, knowledge, etc. And then added value, professional savvy, leadership. Yep. True calling, higher purpose. Doc and I certainly talked a lot about all of those topics before. Sometimes all three levels can go to work with you. Sometimes it's a crossroads inside and outside of a 9 to 5 job. Maybe some food for thought. Yeah. So maybe you're not applying your whole self at every single moment in your job, certainly. And maybe it's that brings up an interesting question, because if who is who owns that? Does your boss own helping your team bring your whole self to work, or does the individual own bringing their whole self to work?
I think it's somewhere in the middle, isn't it? like,
Ideally, right?
I think it's you. I think as a leader, you create the environment that people can bring their whole self to work, but people have to choose to bring them. You have to elect the body. Like there's some people in your office where you know everything about their life, and
Yeah.
it's not even you like you don't even want to know, but they like it's like you walk into their office and there's pictures of their kids. There's picture of if they're in the fishing, there's picture of of a fish. There's like a lot of things going on, and you can walk in and pick up so much about them just by looking at their office.
Yep.
Um, However, I'm one of those people that is like I will tell you everything, a lot of things about me, but if you walk into my office, it is sometimes just like blank. Like it's like I can pick up my my messenger bag and some files and walk out, and it looks like no one's ever been in that office. No one's ever been in office. But if you sat down to talk to me in a meeting or outside of a meeting, you would know that there's like, oh, these Chris used to teach kids. Ask Chris about kids. Like he used to teach elementary school. He's a professor. Ask Chris about professor. Like, oh, he's been through that. Ask Chris about that.
Yeah.
I think there are different ways of displaying it, and there's this ways of sharing it. And I think creating an environment that allows some person to do that, and that person feeling safe with the other person to do that.
Yeah.
But I think it's the leadership's responsibility to create that environment, but it's also the willfulness of the worker or willfulness of the employee or willfulness of whoever of the consultant or the work group to walk in
Yeah.
and share that and let that be known that they're willingly to share that, even if you're not willing to share back sometimes.
It takes boldness, that's for sure, to walk into a place that you're not sure if it's safe to share that or not, and just share it anyway. Um, as a career coach and a leadership coach, I definitely think the onus is on both people too, because I'm saying understand the conditions that help you thrive the most and qualify your next employer based on those things, which you can't always like check every single thing off the list before you accept an opportunity, right? um, and you can get better at managing up and gradually coaching subtly your boss to be more accepting of you and your whole self. I certainly seen that happen. But if you have an environment, which most environments are, because it just hasn't transformed yet, but that's what the C3 community and these events are all about, is transforming that. You don't Most companies don't allow their employees to bring their whole selves to work. It's just not the standard. It's not the norm. And how do we change that? I mean, individually, yes, we model vulnerability. We get to know the people that are working for us, that are on our team, that we're working with, understanding what they got going on, being just responding in a way that it feels safe, and offering, support. Then you still have the need for performance. Like companies just will not sustain themselves at the same time in creating profits and keeping all the jobs available if they spend all their time helping their employees with all the things, right? There are new benefits companies coming out, which I find very interesting and intriguing, and I hope that it becomes something that spreads into other areas. I know companies are getting better at being aware that their employees have things going on that are impacting all areas of their lives, including their work, and helping them with behavioral therapy, financial literacy and advisement, caregiving support. There are some companies that are doing that great. And I would definitely love to make sure that the success of those programs is something that becomes way more evident to other companies who are not doing that yet. But the case studies prove, like, this investment that companies are making in their people as a whole person are paying off. They are getting better retention. They're getting better performance. They're spending less on healthcare. They're getting less absenteeism, less presenteeism. I mean, it's not like it's a question of, well, if we spend money on this, are we gonna, lose money on? It's just, it's evident now. What have you seen in terms of companies instituting whole self policies?
I see a lot. I see a lot of. I see a lot of organizations on the more on the social sector side. Like the touchy feely side. And I think it's easier to do it in their environment because they are dealing with a cause in which in which you see issues and you see the depths of issues. So I know a lot of organizations in Delaware that contract with the state for for financial education assistance,
Mm-hmm.
how the wealth building, and I see a lot of them that do that have a hotline for emotional and psychological issues.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of that actually are they have flex time, like even like I can come in at 7 and leave at 3 because my kids go to school at 7. I can be home for them at 3. So
Mm-hmm.
they're adapting because they are dealing with a community in which there's so many issues, and they realize that the issues don't just the issues that the community is dealing with doesn't just stop at at the gate. It actually involves the organization itself,
Yeah.
and there are more likely to be discussions about these type of issues within the organization like that, and
Mm-hmm.
they're willing to be accepted. They're willing to adapt the environment.
Yeah.
And I think they realize. I think on the other side, I think the for-profit sector is starting to realize that as well, as you said, and
Mm-hmm.
realizing that we have to it's like someone not coming in because their child is sick, and they have to make a decision about whether they want to stay at home all day with their child or come into work and have 50 phone calls, or they can't find someone, a babysitter, and these are all things that we have to be ready for.
Yeah.
And if one person is going through that, then how many other people are going through that,
Right.
and how that affecting our bottom line, or how
Mm-hmm.
that affecting our productivity, and how many people are leaving a job because they thought they were going to work 40 hours a week, and they ended up working 60 hours a week.
Mm-hmm. Oh my
And they
gosh,
have
this happens
and
all
they
the
have,
time.
and they have other
It's happening especially
responsibilities.
now. People are getting
Yeah,
hired in positions and they're working for somebody, then the boss leaves. Now they're doing their boss's job. They just got there. It's
yeah,
happening all over the place.
yeah. And how does someone actually have that conversation without being
Mm-hmm.
admonished? And
Yeah.
how the person conversation, like, I need to go back. I was hired at 40 hours a week. And it's like, well, you're just not dedicated to this organization, and I'm not understanding, like, how are you going to be promoted without being dedicated? And that kind of conversation, which I'm pretty much sure we have all had at some point,
Yes.
that awkwardness, and realizing is like, this job is not for me, and it's like they leave, or
Yes.
they go, and no one actually says, like, we're looking to hire somebody else. If you know anybody, we're trying to bring somebody else quickly as possible, so we can, the weight can be shifted around, or the load can be shared among people.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of organizations that aren't having that conversation at all, of saying, like, hey, guess what? If this is the way it is, and if you can't adapt to the environment, you can't swim with the rest of the fishes, maybe you shouldn't be here. And
Yes.
people going like, all right, that's all right. And they're going, what? It's like, all right. It's like you gave me a choice, and I chose not being here.
Yeah.
And them being shocked, and
Uh-huh.
them being shocked, like, oh my God,
There's
I
so
didn't
much
know.
shock. I don't know
Yeah,
why there's so much shock. Why are you so shocked? Why didn't you see that coming? I don't
yes,
understand
yes,
that. Doc, as I said, it's a process of building self-awareness. Yes, definitely bosses should be able to be self-aware and also help their team become more self-aware about where they need help, what their talents are, what their strengths are. And self-awareness is something that we all lack in some areas or another. And it's like a muscle. You build it over time. And self-awareness can be a tricky thing because you can become aware of things that you were like, oh, ooh, like negative impacts that you had that you didn't realize you had, and then you have to heal through that, and you have to forgive yourself through that. And that's why a coach is so important, that when you can have those revelations and become aware of things and then become better at being self-aware, because you have to have a positive your brain just needs some kind of positive reinforcement around self-awareness so that there's an outcome that's good in the end, in order to get better and better at self-awareness. Because if you get better at self-awareness and then become aware of just what a jerk you've been all these years, then you got to do the hard work of cleaning up big messes you've made and things that you've done. Yeah, no, totally. So I wanted to close with a question, and I had that question in my mind and I just let it slip. So let me just take a moment to tell people about the C3 community and give you an opportunity to join. If you're here, that's what I wanted to say. If you're an individual performer and or leader, things that I would advise you, and I'm going to ask you, Chris, to come up with your own advice. How can you help to transform the environment at your company to be better welcoming of whole selves? And then how can you as an individual own bringing your whole self to work better? That self-awareness is, I think coaching is amazing. I always have a coach. It's an investment that you make in yourself so that you can continue to get better. If you're a leader and you have other people's professions, livelihoods, attached to your ability to lead them through it, you owe it to them to be coached and increase your self-awareness. So coaching is definitely something that I recommend. Everybody has blind spots. Have somebody who can help you recognize those blind spots, and then also help you, again, clean up those messes and reestablish your higher self, and help people get to know your higher self a little better at the same time. What is your advice, Chris? How can individuals and leaders be better at encouraging whole self at work?
I think one, be invested into the development of the people you supervise or people you manage, and be fully invested, and as well as offer opportunities. I think two, I think I think in one of the books I read, 11 Rings, by the old Chicago coach. He said, I have my team want to be coached. I have my team. Like he said, that's a commitment. I have to be willing to accept to be their coach, but I also realize that it goes both ways. They have to coach me, and I have to coach them. So if they're willing to be coached by me, I'm willing to be coached by them.
Yeah.
And we buy in, and that's how we start off. That's how we start off.
Yeah.
And I think three, give yourself time. It takes mistakes, and not every person you coach is going to be developed into what you think they should be.
Right.
They're going to develop into who they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we have this idea where we have this, well, this person should be at this level at this point, and I said sometimes we as leaders we undervalue people. I don't think they'll ever make that transition. I don't think, and I think in saying that, you're automatically discounting that person. You're automatically not giving them opportunities to be. I always joke around with somebody. I said, you always give people the opportunity to surprise you. And it's like you don't know when they'll do it, but you give them time, you give them opportunities, and you give them chances. You'd be surprised how much they'll surprise you. And I think
that's the thing. The detachment from the outcome when you're coaching somebody, that can be hard for a boss when that person's performance is that means your success too, right?
Yes, of course.
It's really challenging to be a coach and a leader at the same time. But being detached and just saying, all I can do is bring you this far, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And giving you the environment that if you succeed, succeed or fail, we're both going to learn something from this.
Yeah.
And I say we're both going to learn something from this, because I think that's part of it too. I think it can't be one way. There's been so many mentors I've had that, and coaches that I've had that, we have it's not a one-way discussion. It's a conversation.
Yeah.
And about this is where I want to be, and this is where you're going to this is where you want to be, and this is what I want to do. Give me your experience, and I'll tell you what I'm going through, and they'll sit back and reflect on what I said, and based on my experience, but I never thought about it doing that way, and you're doing something that I never thought I'd be doing, but I'm learning something from that. And I think that's how you build the environment, and you build a whole self at work.
Yeah.
And you build a safe space for whole self at work, and And that's when as someone said, like, that's when the idea of the different levels all start meeting each other.
Right.
Like, the talent and the intangibles and the opportunities and the purpose all start meeting each other, and you start
Mm-hmm.
and becomes resonating. I think when that happens, there's no telling what anybody. That's where innovation lives, and impact lives, and growth lives. Is
Yeah.
that space?
Well, I could talk definitely for another
Oh
hour
yeah.
about this. Thankfully, we do these monthly. So if you want to be, we have a whole year of great content that has been chosen by our C3 community. We did a yearly strategy session where we had fun with Kahoot and got ideas on different topics and speakers. This topic has been in our poll. This topic was chosen by our C3 community. They voted for it. It's what they wanted this month, so we delivered it. And we got a whole year of great content to bring you. So if you want more of this, join the C3 community. I've just put the link down there. It's if you want to jump on these events, if there's some thoughts you have, some insights, some tools, please come and share them. That's what we're doing here. We're just trying to collaborate and co-create so that we can have a collective wisdom that helps to accelerate the pace of change, and so we can accelerate the momentum of consciousness at the same time. So thanks for coming, Chris. It's great to see you again. Weather's
Yes.
getting warmer. Maybe we'll get out there for a hike sometime.
Yeah. Most definitely.
And thank you for watching. Thanks to everybody who commented. Really glad you were here. Look forward to next month. Take care.
Take care.